An American combat aircraft. Final preparations before takeoff. The crew has been over the destination of this flight many times before, but this time the bomb bays will be empty. The war is over. The men on board have a special mission and are equipped with film cameras containing a then uncustomary recording material, color film. Their task is to perform a non-routine assignment, war reporting without a war. What is there to be filmed? The camera team knows very little about their film objective and are shooting their first pictures on this hot summer day in 1945 from a bomber's perspective over Berlin. To the foreign visitor, this landscape of ruins at first barely looks like more than bizarre stage scenery. The skeleton of a city in glistening sunlight. Picturesque motifs for film professionals. An idol of destruction. But there are still signs of life in this dead city. Human life does exist between these senseless walls. How can they possibly live here? What have they gone through? An interpreter brings some of them before the camera. These are the first Germans the Americans encounter, the enemy, upon whose homes a barrage of bombs has dropped a few weeks before. Some of them do talk. The interpreter can only make out about half of what they say. Yes, his building was bombed out, and now his only home is a cellar. For 3 weeks, she has attempted to find a roof over her head, running all over. She was evicted from her last place by the occupation forces. Now she doesn't know where to turn. Tragic fates, reports, which don't mean a thing to someone who has not experienced something like this. Sheer words. The Americans want an official statement and are taken to the man who at this time is the highest civilian official in this pile of rubble. He has never before served in an official capacity. Shortly after their takeover of Berlin, the Russians picked him up and gave him the title of Lord Mayor. Why? He doesn't know himself. The Berliners joke that he was the only man left who still possessed a frock coat, and this is why the Russians chose him. The Lord Mayor has no idea of how long it will take to remove the debris, or how long it would take to rebuild the city. His experts estimate at least 50 years. The Americans, always eager for statistics, are told that the rubble of this city would suffice to build a dam 38 yards wide and 5.5 yards high from Berlin to Dortmund. But where is Dortmund? The ruins of the synagogue are older than those around it. The synagogue wasn't hit by enemy bombs, but rather burnt down by the Germans 7 years earlier. Here, the first acts of arson were committed. Only 8,000 Berlin Jews out of a total of 70,000 who were unable to emigrate managed to survive. Several thousands of those Jews who survived the war hid themselves in Berlin until the war was over. They, as well as political opponents of the Nazi regime, were kept under cover by friends who risked their lives doing so. Not possessing food ration cards, they existed only from what their hosts, who had little themselves, managed secretly to give them. During the bomb attacks, they were not able to take cover in the air raid shelters. Nobody knows how many died in the flames or bled to death because they couldn't find help during those horrible nights of bombing. A wrecked airplane in a Berlin park. In this sport aircraft, a general, Ritter von Greim, and Hanna Reich, a female test pilot of the German Air Force, flew into Berlin. From there, it was only a couple hundred meters to their destination in Wilhelmstrasse, the Reich's chancellery. In April, to Hanna Reich, the Führer's bunker in the Reich's chancellery represented the altar of the fatherland. By July, the Reich's chancellery had long become a tourist attraction, a sightseeing tour for the Allies. The entrance to the bunker where Hitler committed suicide. Ventilation shafts. The cans used to pour gasoline over Hitler's body. The Hotel Kaiserhof across the street, Hitler's headquarters only for a short period. Its history goes back quite further. The German Emperor Wilhelm I used to take his baths here, as the castle had no bathtub then. Berlin, the capital of three fallen empires, the Third Reich, the Weimar Republic, and the Kaiserreich. Unter den Linden, the stately street of the metropolis, the Brandenburg Gate, symbol of the Reich. Americans are shooting postcard pictures of the local sites of interest: the university, the Tomb of Honor, the Armory, the theater, the French cathedral, the castle. But only the bombed-out facades of these sites are still standing, frameworks of the past. A monument dedicated to former German victories. On this day in July, the British Union Jack is waving here, yet the English had arrived here only a few days earlier, and it was the Russians who gained the first victory in Berlin. It's only a few weeks ago that soldiers of the Red Army died here, who were buried at this spot. To the Reichstag, to Potsdam, to Nauen, Cyrillic signs are marking the way in Berlin. The city's face in July 1945 is characterized by the victorious power that was first to arrive here, the Russians. And the Americans, who were drilled not to fraternize with the Germans, astonishingly observe with how much friendliness the Soviet allies advertise their political system to the defeated Germans. An interpreter translates Stalin's maxims. The Hitlers come and go, but the German people and the German state will always remain. Or, the Red Army is free from racial hatred because they have been brought up to believe in the equality of all races and to respect the rights of other nations. The Russians in Berlin. This is another startling scene for the Americans. Russian supplies arriving in farmers' hay wagons. Country life in the middle of a metropolis. The soldiers